Good morning. Shall we begin our Montecito Planning Commission? Shall we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So are we prepared to move to the item 3, the elections of the Montecito Chair and Vice Chair? So we can open this up with nominations for MPC Chair. Go right ahead.
I move to recommend our first Vice Chair, Marshall Miller, to be chair.
Well, you need to comment.
Having served as a second vice chair, hopefully in an acceptable capacity, I have appreciated the role. I'm a little concerned about my ability to be chair in this calendar year. I had a vision of being chair in the following year and was arranging my work schedule accordingly, but I'm concerned I'm not up to the challenge of being chair now.
Do we have a second possible nomination?
I would nominate Ron to continue as chair.
I second that. Perhaps Secretary Wilson could give us the order, how order would change with different sort of nomination configurations, in other words. Do you know of which I am speaking? Since second vice chair is really, since we lost the first chair, the second vice chair, and then the algorithm or the path. Thank you.
Commissioner Sinauer, through the chair. Thank you. Past practice has been to have a rotation from first vice chair, then second vice chair, and then that's how it's been traditionally. It is at the discretion of the commission to nominate and select the chair. It doesn't have to follow that order. It's not prescribed, but that's the traditional practice has been. I think the new commissioner is in what would have been the first vice chair's position, and then Commissioner Miller is in the second vice chair, and with Chair Pliche. So the rotation would have been Commissioner Miller, and then down through the order that way. It's a discretion of the commission. If you wanted to nominate Mr. or Chair Pliche to resume, that is fine, and then you could keep the rotation going the following year if you want to do that. Or you're open to nominating another individual to be chair.
Are we in the, has it been seconded? I'm sorry, or not? I second, okay.
You could bring it back.
Okay, so my second stands.
So, Mr. Chair and Commissioner, I think, yes, so Commissioner Sinauer nominated Chair Pliche, and it was seconded by Commissioner. Oh, my bad. It's moving too fast for me today. So, yes. So, right now, we do have a nomination and a second, so we can move to discussion before we call for a vote.
Any discussion? Bob, would you like to say anything?
Are you willing to do
Unless you want to volunteer, Bob.
We've had discussions just because of
Careful.
we've had discussions just because of everybody's workload. I know that Ron has carried the load now for twice. So if he feels his schedule is too busy to do it, I'm happy to volunteer to do it. I indicated to him that I would be willing to do that.
Comment?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, just context as well. We're in May,
Yeah.
so there's really a half a
Yeah.
year left.
Okay, so I have no problem finishing the year, if that's what you're suggesting. I can do that. I just want to make sure that there's any discord besides, I want to make sure everybody has a chance if they want to be chair to, I'm not pinned to it, but I will do it. So,
So Chair, and then I apologize, just now that my brain's moving.
better?
So I think to answer Commissioner Sinauer's original question, if this motion is successful, then a vice chair could follow the or the rotation, which I believe would be Commissioner Stahl would be the next one up, and then Commissioner Miller. Because I think Commissioner Keller was first vice chair, and then Commissioner Miller was second vice chair. So that's a potential order you could go. Or you could
I
nominate,
disagree with that.
or you could nominate Commissioner,
I think I was second vice chair. Commissioner Keller was,
It's on here, isn't
she
it?
was,
Yeah.
she was first, so she would be right. And who was second vice chair?
This guy was.
Okay, perfect. So we're aligned with your,
So,
so yeah, Chair and Commissioner, it's an option. We'll be doing this all over again in about 7 months in January of next year.
well, as I understand it, he was going to prepare to be chair next year. And unless we have a problem with that, do we have a problem with that? I guess we have to wait and see. Let's vote on this here at first, and we'll move after that. Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second. You want to take votes here for me?
If you like me to, I'm happy to. Okay. Commissioner Kupiak,
Aye.
Commissioner Senauer,
aye.
Commissioner Miller,
Aye.
Commissioner Stahl,
Aye.
and Chair Felice.
Okay,
I take that as a yes. Motion
Yes.
passes 5-0.
good morning. All right, so we move to vice chair. So let me understand this, Donna, so we have an agreement here. With Marshall being second chair last year, he was prospective to be first chair this year with Susan as the chair. Now, I'm the chair. Does he not move up? Is that not the official path or not?
Chair Pleche and Commissioners, there's no official path.
Okay, there won't be
So
then.
you could, as a commission, discuss who would like to nominate as first chair this year. And that role would be in Commissioner or Chair Felice's absence, they would step in as chair for
Right.
this year. The order would be that typically how we do it is the following year, the first chair is nominated to become chair. So really what we're doing today is
All right, I
providing a
got it.
second for the chair.
So do we have a nomination for first chair?
Well, I think I think there's two paths we can take. One is the idea, if this had all followed, if change had not happened, we would have had a different chair starting now. And that, the seat that chair would be Commissioner Stahl. But that, I think you, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but had not necessarily wanted to step into the chair role as your inauguration to the commission. And so we've extended your term in a sense. So the question, I think, on the table is whether Commissioner Stahl, sitting in the first chair role, would step into being chair next year, or whether or not, and then I would be, as having been second chair, or second vice chair, would be stepping in behind that seat in the following year. Now, I am happy, I would want to show deference to Commissioner Stahl as to kind of interest in that role, and so okay, so.
Okay, so Bob, do you or somebody have a nominee?
I have a nomination. I nominate Marshall as the first vice chair.
Second?
Okay, do we have a vote or discussion or any more discussion, or can we just vote? Please.
We can do by roll call. You could even say
Okay.
all in favor if you like.
Let's go.
Okay. Commissioner Kupiec.
Aye.
Commissioner Senauer.
Aye.
Commissioner Miller.
Should I abstain in this context?
Yeah,
You don't have to.
Okay. Aye.
Commissioner Stoll. And Chair Palice.
yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Yeah. All right. No further ado, we'll move on.
So,
Yes.
so, Mr. Chair, there is a uniqueness to this commission, is to nominate a second vice chair.
Okay, so,
There are many uniquenesses to this commission.
yeah. Okay, so do we have a nomination for second chair?
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Senhauer. I believe that's how the rotation has flowed.
Okay. I will second that. So we have a voice vote here, starting with,
Commissioner Kupiec.
Aye.
Commissioner Senauer.
Aye.
Commissioner Miller.
Aye.
Commissioner Stoll. Aye. Chair Palice.
aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Oh, goody. All right, thank you. All right, on to more pressing business. So, agenda status report, shall we have that?
Mr. Chair, congratulations for your nomination. Look forward to working with you. Sorry, Mr. Chair.
That's all right.
Congratulations. You're in order. Looking at the agenda status report is, we would recommend a slight change to the agenda today. We would like to recommend that item 1 be moved to item number 3, which is the Brown Act teleconferencing and training, or Brown Act training. And then we would just reorder and have the Clark Soundwell be item number 1 with the safety element update number 2. I do see that we do have members of the fire department with us and staff, so in order to help them
Okay,
move on with their day, we can adjust the agenda in that
that sounds
order.
fine. Anything else? Okay, so, projection report.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, looking at the projection report, our next scheduled hearing is on June 21st. And there's 2 items projected for that date, which is there's a lot line adjustment as well as a development plan. And then looking further into the year, we have nothing projected for July 19th or August 16th. That's as far as the projection report goes.
Aren't the Soundwells coming back for July again? That's a joke, sorry. Sorry, go ahead. A little humor.
So, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, looking further in the year, the one item that's in the horizon that we anticipate coming in September, unless we have it in July or August, but we are currently working with the applicants on the debris nets.
Right.
So there's 2 things that will be coming to the commission, hopefully by the end of the year. The first one is the status report. So the condition of approval require that they provide a status update on an annual basis. We have the 2022 report. However, because of the January 2023 storms, circumstances have changed. So the 2022 report is almost irrelevant because things changed immediately in January. So we're working on preparing a 2023 report. That's anticipated would be coming between now and September, and more than likely that'll be coming in September. Then the follow-up to that is that we're in discussions with them that they may be submitting a application to revise that permit
Right.
to potentially extend those debris nets out another few years, maybe another 5 years. So those are two separate actions that will be coming to the Planning Commission potentially before the end of the year. So it's not on the projection report now, but I just wanted to have the commission be able to see what's in the horizon.
Thank you. It seems that they are progressing, trying to get the approval of the 5 landowners, and that is what will dictate how soon they'll be in front of us, as I understand it.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, that's correct. That's our understanding as well, that they're working on that aspect of the application. But we will be coming to you for
Okay.
an update on the status of the nets as well.
Go ahead.
Could we potentially agendize the idea of the annual reporting window for these debris nets to move to the summer? And that the problem of this year will not necessarily be unique. Of reporting on a calendar year is halfway through what we'll call the flood season or the active season for the function of a debris net. And so it's in some ways, a reporting cycle would make a lot more sense to run July to June than it would January to December, in that December, January, February is when the nets are doing their net thing. And so I understand that's not something we can take up now, but I was wondering, while we are having the annual report, if we could agendize the idea of changing the seasonality of reporting.
Short answer is we'll look into that. I think there's a condition of approval that dictates that there's an annual report. And I don't think that is specific enough to what you're doing. However, that could be a request to our permit compliance staff to be able to do the annual reporting within that window. So I think we can have that discussion when we come back with the annual report. There's a lot of things, moving pieces as far as getting that report done. As far as cleaning out the nets and getting approval to be able to access them.
Mr.
So
Senator?
it's a valid question, and I think we'd bring it up when we bring the reports up. Or when we bring it up, an application comes before you, you can modify that condition under a discretionary action to do that.
And that makes, what I have found is that appropriately county planning staff does not necessarily like creative ideas off the cuff. And so what I didn't want to do was kind of float this idea when it was up here for approval. So I don't know if I can kind of seed the process at this, kind of start the ball rolling here so that you're not the beneficiaries of my witty ideas and trying to respond on the spot.
Chair and Commissioner Miller, thank you.
Yes,
We
okay,
appreciate
so
that.
anybody, any comments here before we move on?
Quick question. When was the application presented to us? Was it in May of, is the clock ticking for an annual report in May, but was it May of what? Do we know? Was that the month, first of all?
So Chair and Commissioner Senauer. Commissioner, could you turn your mic off? Sorry, we're getting some feedback. I think the original permit was heard in December. And I believe, yeah, you're challenging my memory. There was an emergency permit, and we brought that, and then we came back, and I think we'd actually set the timeframes on a subsequent year as far as that included the first year and then added 4 years. I think that's what had happened. But I think it was at the end of that subsequent year that we took that action. I don't recall when if there is a requirement for an annual report to be done. I think there's a requirement for the nets to be done, but then there was a clause that says as long as it's safe or you have access to it. My understanding is that applicants are working with the Forest Service to be able to get permission to go in there and make sure it's safe for them to do that. So that's why there's been a little bit of a delay. and getting that report done. So it's usually after, in like maybe summer, late fall, that we'd actually have that report for that would be for the prior year. So what's happening is things happened this year, so we're actually getting data for this year. So it's too early for the 2023 report.
Okay, so it becomes discretionary for the quote annual if events or issues arise where that has to be reviewed prior to a quote annual report.
Yeah, so Commissioner Miller's comments are really relevant to this because of the rainy seasons. So the way we've set it up would be more of a calendar year, but what we're finding is in real life, things changed from calendar year to calendar year. And so we're kind of playing catch up on that. So that's kind of where we're at right now is we're in 2023, so you wouldn't hear about it till next year, but we're trying to get that information to you actually ahead of time, if that makes sense.
And that's much appreciated, and it seems to make sense to codify the reality of what you're doing.
Okay, shall we move on?
Please, we're not agendized for this, so.
Yes,
we
right.
Probably
So,
should not talk anymore about it.
yes, unless
Jeff.
we've had, pardon me, go ahead.
Should County Flood Control make a recommendation? I mean, I think that our review of the report is really about the maintenance of the nets and how well they're doing in maintaining them. And I would think that in terms of setting a date for us to be prepared to review a report that had cogent information in it, they might want to be the ones to make the recommendation about when that report should be submitted.
I disagree because they're not the applicants, and they might be next year if it's transferred, but right now it's the private resiliency nonprofits.
Only that there are government advisors.
Okay,
Okay.
anything more? Thank you. Shall we move on? So, planning commissioners' informational reports, do we have any?
Mr. Chair, I think we skipped over public comment.
Oh, my goodness. How'd that happen?
But just, it's formality because I do not have any requests to speak.
All right, just want to interrupt me. That's good, that's good.
I'll keep doing it.
Good work. Is there anybody in the audience, public comment? Okay, we'll move on then. Thank you, David. Anybody, starting with Susan, you want to go first? Pardon me. Donna? Boy, I'm doing really good. Start up. Susan Petrovich is not here.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a couple things. One, I'd like to remind everyone of the Montecito Watershed informational meeting. May 20th is Director, okay, Plowman is going to bring that up, so I reserve that announcement or refreshing calendar issue to Director Plowman. The other, and perhaps Director Plowman will address this also, is the Montecito GSA, Groundwater Sustainability Agency, GSP. The Groundwater Sustainability Plan is set to go before the GSA on Friday, May 19th at 11 a.m. And they will consider approval of the GSP, which has been in the works for some time. I am a volunteer on the Groundwater Sustainability Stakeholder Committee, and it's been many years of work. And so it will be Zoomed, it will be archived video, and but it's of import if you have availability. If you can't on May 19th at 11 to review the archive video. On their website, they have the details very soon, if not now. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. I'd like to make notice that we do have a meeting in Montecito at MUS on the 23rd. Flood control is going to report. Oh, yeah, that's part of your program. Sorry. All right. It's just on my calendar. It's all flood control meetings. All right, sorry. All right. Did you just repeat that earlier? Gosh. God, I'm 2 steps behind. I shouldn't be chair today. All right. So, anybody else have any meetings they attended or? All right. So, shall we move to the minutes? The 23rd of the April 5th meeting. Those who attended, anybody have any comments?
I
Yes,
move
Bob?
to approve the minutes of
Okay.
the April
Eh.
5th meeting.
I abstain. I was not present.
I second.
Okay, so approved. If we approve, I'll present.
You can ask for just, we don't have to do roll call, but we can if you'd like to. If you like to say, all those in favor.
Yeah, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, let's move on then.
So that is, 4 yeses, 1
One
abstention.
abstention.
Great, thank you.
All right, finally. Your time is here. Is there a meeting next Tuesday or anything?
No meetings. There's no meetings. I'm just kidding. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. Just a couple of brief updates. Just want to let you all know that the budget hearings this year for the county will be held June 16th and June 20th. That's a Friday and a Tuesday. And they will, we had our budget workshops already in April, and then this will just be the final action that the board takes. We did not have any requests that we're asking the board to fund additionally for our department, so our process for P&D should be pretty streamlined. We did add, as part of our budget this year that we built, we added 2 building permit techs to our building department because we've been having some challenges in moving through the building permit process because we've had some staffing issues. And we didn't have a lot of redundancy in the department, and so we're staffing up some to make sure that we can keep things moving in a more streamlined fashion. So this summer, the board will be taking their regular 4-week break, and it is the last week of July and the first 3 weeks of August. So they will be out of session, and then on the housing element, we submitted our comments and we incorporated changes into the document from public comment. We submitted it to the state on the 31st of March. We expect to get comments on July 2nd. And in the interim, we're starting work on the programmatic EIR for that. Flood control will be having a meeting in Montecito. It's the watershed study from 5:30 to 7 p.m. It's at Montecito Union School District campus, and it's on the 23rd of May. And then in terms of board actions, the board took action on the extension of we had a series of COVID provisions that allowed some flexibility and in our permitting process for non-conforming uses and for maybe softening some of the permit conditions to help businesses continue to operate during the COVID times. We extended that for economic recovery purposes in inland, Montecito, and coastal. We now have extended it again in the inland area for 1 more year because we had we wanted to allow additional economic recovery because some of the businesses in the inland area were still utilizing those provisions. We do have a program that's coming forward that's going to allow some more flexibility, and will replace that temporary emergency ordinance. And that really is tied to one of the key things that's being utilized in the inland area is food service at wineries. and we did not want that to expire before it became a permanent allowed use. There are other small things that businesses were using, maybe doing some stuff outdoors, but that's kind of the key thing that we wanted to extend. And that'll expire October 24th. I'm sorry, October 31st, 2024. And that happened yesterday at the board. And then future board items, we have the Coral Casino appeal that will be on July 11th. And then we have the wildfire regulations and provisions to the safety element that will also be going in July. And that's something that you guys will hear before that. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? I have a couple, but you go first.
Just as a matter of process, I'm curious, for the Coral Casino appeal, does that go to the countywide planning commission before it goes to the board? It goes straight from us to the board? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And on that topic, is that, I believe there's just not a singular appellant, is that held in toto, all of them, all
At
the
once?
appellants presented that meeting?
Yeah,
Okay.
Commissioner Senower through the chair. There are 5 appeals, and they will all be heard at one time. So each appellant will have an opportunity to speak.
I have a question for you off that topic, but there is a local ruling by Judge Adderley regarding the hot springs issue, and I'm just curious, that was regarding parking and the Mountain Drive Road, and is there a reason why that doesn't show up and come in front of us? Is that just out of policy that these types of issues just don't come to our commission?
Mr. Chair, I'm going to have to tell you that don't know about Judge Anderley's decision. And so I'm
Well,
not.
it's a very expensive decision for the county.
Yeah, I can't really speak to it at this point. We could certainly, my next
Okay, sure.
hearing, I
I'm
can
just
maybe
curious,
give
it's-
you some
it's-
ideas about it, but.
It's the third defeat, and it's never been in front of us, even though I've spent a lot of time working with both sides. It's just curious why that kind of
It may be,
issue.
it may just be something that is generally taken care of through Public Works Division.
Right.
And so not, staff makes lots of decisions on different things. It might be a road commissioner decision, so it might not
was,
be.
yeah.
So that would not be within the purview of the planning commission.
Okay.
There are
All right.
specific things that are identified that just go to the road commissioner.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead, Sandy.
Has there been a date set for the Music Academy appeal to be heard?
No, there has not, to my knowledge, but we will report on it, Commissioner Saul, as soon as we hear.
So my lights. I wasn't prepared to be chair today, I don't think. So shall we move on to the standard agenda in its new order with the Clark Wall, Sound Wall, 1136 Hill Road? Shall we proceed with that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The following is a hearing on the request of Martha Clark to consider case numbers 22 CUP 8 and 22 CDP 32 for a minor conditional use permit and an associated coastal development permit, and to determine the project is exempt from the provisions of CEQA pursuant to state CEQA guidelines section 15303E.
Chair, excuse me, could we entertain ex parte before the presentation?
That would be appropriate. Let's do that. Ex parte. So, go right ahead.
Yes, I visited the site in October 22. It was an MBAR site visit, which I joined. We were apprised via Mr. Villalobos, as he often does. And so I attended that with MBAR. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay.
I have driven past it and examined it myself, not as part of the MBAR tour.
Likewise, I have too. Thank you. Okay. With that said, may we now proceed? Staff? Mr. Staff?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. I'm Steve Connor, and I'll be presenting the Clark Soundwall project. The project was continued from the previous March 15th hearing to allow for the applicant to coordinate with flood control staff with regard to the proposed floodgate openings on the fence. A plan check response memo and updated plans were recently provided to the commission to outline recommendations for flood control staff's clearance of the project. Next slide. Here's a vicinity map to orient you to the project site. As you can see in this aerial image, the existing property and structure is located off Hill Road and residential area south of the railroad and Highway 101. Next slide, please. Before your commission today is a request to construct a 12-foot sound wall pursuant to Article 2. A minor conditional use permit is required for fences and walls greater than 8 feet in height. The wall will be insulated with noise dampening material to reduce existing noise resulting from the railroad and highway to the north, and will adjoin the neighbor's existing sound wall. Next slide. Here's the proposed site plan, which shows the wall in yellow highlight. The wall will extend approximately 94 feet eastward from the neighboring sound wall and approximately 68 feet southward from the northeast corner of the owner's property. The owner has recorded an easement, shown in gray here, for a 5-foot long section of the wall indicated by the mouse cursor here. That will be constructed on the western neighbor's property. Okay, next slide. Here are a couple of site photos which depict the existing sound wall on the neighbor's property to the west. The neighbor's existing wall is approximately 12 feet in height. The proposed new sound wall will connect to the existing sound wall near the northwest corner of the subject property. Both neighbors immediately east and west have reviewed the proposed project plans and have no objections to the proposed sound wall. Next slide, please. The wall was designed with lightweight wooden flap gates shown at the bottom of these elevations. The flap gates will ensure that the wall will not restrict surface water flow in the event of a 100-year storm event. County flood control staff has cleared the project for approval because it will not be located within a floodway or flood hazard overlay, and the applicant will be required to comply with the conditions provided in the letter dated April 19th, 2022. Next slide, please. The proposed project has been analyzed and found to be consistent with Article 2 coastal zoning ordinance and the applicable coastal plan policies, as it is incidental to other existing residential use and will provide a sound barrier between a sensitive receptor and an existing noise source, in this case, the railroad and highway corridor. The proposed 12-foot height will not exceed the 25-foot height limit of the 20R1 zone district. The project will be compatible with the neighborhood, and the materials will adjoin and match the existing sound wall along the western property line. The project will minimize the threat of flood potential because the project incorporates lightweight hinged wooden flaps that would not restrict the surface water flow in a 100-year storm event. A site visit was conducted by MBAR, and members found the design and materials consistent with the existing adjacent sound wall. Members acknowledged the need for a sound reduction barrier and recommended that the applicant explore landscape screening options. The project will be allowed to return to MBAR for preliminary and final approval after decision maker action on the CUP. Staff has determined that the project meets the required findings for a minor CUP. Next slide, please. The project can be found exempt pursuant to the reporting requirements of CEQA Guidelines Section 15303E. Examples of this exemption are appurtenant structures, including garages, carports, patios, swimming pools, and fences. Next slide, please. In summary, staff recommends that your commission make the required findings for approval, determine the project is exempt pursuant to CEQA guidelines, and grant approval of the project. That concludes staff's presentation, and we're available for any questions the commission might have.
Yes, Mr. Connor, I noticed that we now have a email from Laura McIntosh, who's the neighbor who's giving the property and the easement. Did you happen to get a recorded document for them to, is that part of the process as far as the easement goes? Because it's just this email, I assume we have that as well, right? Is that,
I believe the email may be from the other neighbor on the eastern side, possibly, but we do, to answer your
1150?
to answer your question, we do have a recorded easement from the neighbor to the west.
Okay,
And
all right.
that was part of the
I understand.
application process.
So this is not her, that's not the person giving the property up that sent the email in. Okay.
I would need to verify that, Chair.
It was
but-
sent to you, of course, it's March 11th, it's been a while. Okay, so Joe, you have anything to say?
Mr. Chair, I think the only other item I would say is that we do have flood control staff available online as well for any questions that you may have for them.
Yes, please, Donna, you have a comment?
I'm just wondering, would it be preferred to hear from the applicant team before we address questions, including flood control at all? Just what is the,
So I understand the applicant is online as well. If you'd like to proceed with their presentation, perhaps that might answer some questions you have.
okay.
And then we could go
okay,
with questions.
thank you.
I stand corrected again. You sure you don't want to be chair? All right, Mr. Connor, is your applicant available?
Mr. Chair, I believe.
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay. Go right ahead.
Hi, I am Tom Pilling. I represent Van Zandt Structural Consultants. Greg has been taking care of this project up to this point, but he is out of town, so I will be sitting in and moving this along, hopefully. I think Steve did a very good job of covering the overall project and the attempt to match the neighboring property, make it consistent with the area and what's been done in the past. Also, we've addressed the questions as far as the arborist. We've addressed the questions as far as the flood control. And we've done calculations submitted to the county, Mark Bergera, Bandegara, and he's reviewed it and helped us along in figuring out the proper amount of square footage that's required for the flow that would occur in that 100-year event. And other than that, the only other thing is that the owner would also like to submit that in addition to the sound mitigation, that she feels that this wall is also helping to provide maybe some additional protection to her property, because there seems to be a lot of say vagrants in the area, homelessness and encampments, and there's been some issues there in the past, and so she just feels that this will help increase her safety or any threat to her property.
Are you complete with that report? Is that enough?
Yes, pretty much. Like I
Okay.
said, I think Steve did a very good job of covering everything that's
Okay.
happened to date and the approach.
Mrs. Sinara?
Thank you both, applicant and staff, very much. A couple questions, or more, but I'll start with a couple. Regarding the flood panels, flood gates, what is the correct term that flood control or Caltrans, whatever, refers to them as?
I believe they're floodgates.
Floodgates, okay. How many are there proposed, if you could count them out or tell me how many there are?
Could we get that elevation? I mean, there's one on each section between the support posts.
Uh,
The number is on the elevation. Could we pull
Okay.
that elevation back up?
And then the dimensions, please. we had this, it's just difficult. I got a magnifying glass in our, it's just, so it would be helpful if you had those metrics. Thank you.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, we have the site plans up on the screen, so you can see elevations shown. So you can see the north wall, the north elevation, and then the south elevation. We'll have to defer to the applicant. I think it's on these plans, but I'm having a hard time seeing it from as far away as I am
Yeah,
for the actual dimensions of
Yeah.
the gates themselves.
Yeah, so it's shown up in the upper right-hand corner. There's a dimension there that,
And what is the I can't determine what it says at all. Just read it off, someone, please.
I'm looking at the same thing. I can't see it either.
It's like 10, yes, that's that one there.
3 feet 6 inches horizontally.
The next one over, we should tell you the height, but
Right, so the overall height is 2'6" from the existing grade.
Okay. And so they're continuous along the whole wall, is that correct? Is there a door there? What is that
Yeah, there's a door for access also.
access? And that's standard door size, and it is hinged inward or outward?
There's a detail that shows it just above. If we scroll down just a little, right there, the second from the left.
Okay. And is it locked?
It just has a standard latch key on it, the pull latch. It could be made with a lock on top of it. They come with those standard latches have a hole that you can put a lock in.
Okay, so the entry would be on the railroad side, on the north side, is that correct? And it would swing inward to the property?
Yes,
Okay, and it is not, it is unlocked? It is not secure, is that correct?
it would be secure in general, I believe, but it again, citing that the owner has some concern with the vagrancy, people that tend to wander the tracks and whatever, and for her safety, she would probably want to keep it locked in general.
But that's on her, right? That is her discretion to lock it or
Yes.
not? Okay,
Yes,
But doesn't the fire department have an automatic key there or flood control? Is there a lockbox there for the county?
I don't know that there's one plan for it at this point.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I'm not aware of any requirement from
Okay.
the fire department. Particularly for a wall like this, a door is not generally required unless the fire department had that in their condition letter. So locking the door would not be something that we would normally require.
if I could continue, Chair. If flood control is available, great. They're on board right now? Online, whatever? Okay. Question is to flood control, please. The flood panels, are they, it's in the 100-year event. I understand that's where the property is. And the properties to the west where this wall is, or the property on the easement, are flood panels required for this particular project? Number one. And two, are they required for the easement to the west wall, which this is going to be contiguous with? Are there existing panels there, or will they be required? To whoever wishes to answer.
Mr. Griffin, are you on as a panelist? He is.
Good morning. Yes, I'm on. Commissioners, Senhauer through the chair. To clarify, this project site is within the recovery map area, but I do not believe it's within the effective FEMA mapping. Our development engineer, Mark Banderaga, is also online here. He can correct me if I'm wrong about any of this. So to answer your question, yes, they need to have flap gates in order for this to work. In order to have a minimal effect on the water surface elevations and to make the project reasonably safe for flooding. One of the details that was not discussed, and one of the issues that we talked about back with the Caltrans project, one of the options that they rejected as not feasible to meet their criteria was a sound wall on stilts, essentially. And what we have here, even below the flap gates, is a clear space gap. So essentially what we have here is a sound wall on stilts, and then above that gap, we have the flap gate. And that has allowed the calculations to work out for them to a point where we're comfortable approving the project. For the adjacent sound wall, it does not appear that those have flap gates. We did not, to my knowledge, I don't know when those were installed, if there was a permit for them. I don't ever recall. Certainly since I've been here, that's not a project that we've seen.
So the requirement would not be retroactive to the easement property with the continuous wall proposed, that flap gates be installed on that wall, nor any other walls who exist in this 100-year flood area. I'm just confused how one part would be helpful, but the rest is being left alone. Do you follow my question?
I do. Perhaps that's a question better answered by planning.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, so the project next door is not under review today, and so we haven't looked into the details of that development. It's possible that wall was put in place before the requirement for a minor conditional use permit and review by flood control. If that's something we could look into, but currently the requirements are as they are being proposed for this project.
Yeah, my question regarded consistency into public health and safety, actually, if that's the predicate for the panels to be installed and working order. One more question about the panels. There are other questions here, and I don't want to continue. I'll pick up later. But I've noticed in other floodgates throughout off of 101, there are horizontal bars across the opening. I know they're flaps, but people can crawl through the flaps with these dimensions as easily as. Is there, for the public safety issue, which the applicant wrote very appropriately, is part of this, her concern. My question is, if there are no horizontal, like rods, into that space, what would preclude someone, like a doggy door, simply going through?
Flood control can answer that, maybe?
That was not analyzed as part of our review. We're reviewing it for flood control purposes.
Commissioner Senhauer, through the chair, I would say that the property owner takes the responsibility of ensuring safety of their property. They have to propose a wall that meets flood requirements. Flood reviews it, this does meet their requirements, but they're gonna, I think like any other property owner, they have to take responsibility for the safety of their property.
Okay, thank you. Bob, do you have a question?
It's just to clarify what we're talking about. I mean, this is not a security wall. It's 12 inches off the ground. It's got an 18-inch flood gap. If anybody wants to crawl underneath that wall, there's nothing to stop them from doing that. This is a safety issue about water, not about any other kind of security.
I have one final question for flood control. If you go across the freeway directly, are you in city of Santa Barbara or are you in Montecito?
I'm not entirely sure without looking at a map. Maybe planning could also answer that question.
No. This is, no. I think it's the city, but I just was curious if you were allowing these same flap gates. Is that part of what's happening in the future on the freeway opposite this residential property?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, so as you can see on the screen, we have an aerial photo. So the county's jurisdiction is where this property is located with the arrow. Directly above that is the transportation corridor of Highway 101 and the railroad, and then the city is
Right.
just above. I'm not sure if the city includes the railroad and the highway. We could look into that, but
No,
it
I'm
may
just
take a few
curious
minutes.
because we've had this discussion that these panels don't work and won't be allowed in Montecito. I'm just curious if this, since we're not part of that approval process, is the like type flood control on the north side of the freeway where this water would come from if it actually got that high? But if we don't know the answer, we'll skip it. Thank you. All right, let's move on. Anybody else have any other questions for the applicant or for staff? Steve? Or anyone?
I'm curious to chat with flood control for a bit. To Chair Police's point, that part of why these are being approved by flood control is that this area, while in Montecito, was not subject to the FEMA interim flood map. Am I understanding that correctly?
Commissioner Miller, through the chair. No, that's not true. This area is within the recovery map area. They're being approved because the design incorporates, the clear gap below the flap gate, and their calculations for their calculations for flood flow through the wall was acceptable.
And so, I'm for what it's worth, and we'll get to commissioner comments soon. Is anyone else getting feedback on? I apologize, I don't know how to stop that. That when a similar idea was requested for review by the Planning Commission last summer in our last flood wall extravaganza, and that idea was repeatedly turned down as that it wasn't appropriately mitigating to flows. Walk me through in layman's terms why this works here and doesn't work a half a mile further down the highway.
Well, I don't want to speak for Caltrans, but Caltrans, as I recall, did not want to consider a similar proposal to what you're seeing here. They did not want to consider a wall on stilts with a clear gap below the wall.
But my understanding was that the reason for that the sound walls were declined as part of the 101 project was that the FEMA maps inundation results were deemed by county flood control to be unacceptable, but that in this scenario they are. And so I'm asking this question earnestly as a part of educating me, but I am to be very clear, I appreciate why sound walls are important, but I want to be able to talk to the people of Montecito with clarity as to why we're able to approve this project, but why the other sound walls, while very similar, ultimately were not able to be completed. When in a rather intense series of back and forths with Caltrans, they put that responsibility on county flood control, that this was that ultimately it was county flood control's fidelity to the FEMA map was the problem. So help me reconcile this.
Sure. So the condition that was put on Caltrans was to not adversely affect water surface elevations and create a project that was not reasonably safe from flooding. They could not demonstrate that. Their own modeling had rises of water surface elevation well in excess of a foot across 30 plus properties.
And what about this project? Clearly, this project doesn't model that, right? Or otherwise you wouldn't be approving it.
Correct. So this project, we made them go through a modeling process, a little different because we're looking at a very finite area here compared to the Caltrans project. But we did have them analyze their wall. And we determined that analysis shows that the water surface elevations, while they rise slightly, do not rise nearly as much as what was demonstrated by the Caltrans modeling for their project.
Could you unpack the difference in modeling that you're talking about? Because I feel like it is in the details that we gain comprehension.
Commissioners, can I just please? Okay, thanks. Staff we knew there was going to be a lot of interest in this, so we asked Flood the same questions. I think it's obvious, right? We're talking about a much different scale of what's proposed here on one property versus the Caltrans 101. The geologic conditions in this area are also very different than the 101 project. And so there's some basic, I think, low-level things that make this project very, very different. And then the third thing is, Caltrans is subject to their own federal standards. And so what they're proposing wasn't meeting the federal standards, and that came into play. So what Flood did, because we pressed them, because we wanted to make sure we had an answer, this site-specific for one sound wall on one property, they are able to meet the modeling requirements, and so Flood was able to sign off on it.
I hear that.
Okay.
Comment from the commissioner?
Yeah, I mean, I do want to go back to this. I mean, this is a 30-inch high open waterway at the bottom of this wall. Now, I realize in terms of the federal requirements that Caltrans might be subject to, that I think, potentially a wood sound wall may not be within the federal guidelines in order for them to build. But I'm going to hearken back to the comments that we made last time. If we can't engineer our way out of this problem on the portion of North Jameson that is under contention all the time by Montecitans, that if a 30-inch wide flap type wall that sits a foot off the ground doesn't accommodate that water rise, then I'm a monkey's uncle. It means that if that floodway couldn't be accommodated on North Jameson, I would hazard to say there is no hedgerow at all. I mean, we're talking about a phenomenal amount of water, and no one has ever seen that level of rise. I mean, a 30-inch flood of water coming through that passageway, I just can't see how Caltrans and the federal government couldn't come up with an engineering design, not in wood, that would accommodate this condition. Yep. And I know that we're sitting here waiting for new LIDAR information to come from the Army Corps, but the truth of the matter is some of this stuff that happened on North Jameson is absurd. Sure. This is not an absurd proposal, right. And I don't understand why this isn't appropriate to some of the other solutions that might be available. I don't have any problem with this project, but it does shed a light on the conversations that we were having last year.
Thank you, Bob. I just want to say that part of the problem, as we all know, is that we do not have a model that's non-theoretical. We have it based on all the water not passing through creeks, but passing on the roads, which is not a real scrupulous model. So we are waiting, and the county couldn't wait for Caltrans, so this is where we're at. We do have 6 months to hopefully get something through, and maybe some of the sections between San Isidro and Hickson, which you're familiar with, might pass muster. But until then, we're stuck with it. But this project here, I think we're ready to complete it here. So further comments on the project? Go ahead.
It's not a comment, it's a question. The predicate of the 100-year on this event is different, it is a question, than what has just been referenced on North Jameson, which was dictated as 200-year event. So was that not the differential in approaching the modeling versus here?
Matt, are you able to answer that one?
Yeah, Commissioner Senhauer, through the chair. That's not accurate. The recovery mapping was applied to both projects consistently. They are for the 100-year. I think that maybe there's some confusion since the recovery mapping 100-year flows are greater than the effective mapping 100-year flows. So I can understand some confusion about 100, 200, but no, they were applied consistently to these projects, to this project.
Commissioner.
I appreciate staff. You're anticipating our picadillos and our level of curiosity. It's very professional by you also. Thank you. You've made a couple comments that I want to push a little further on. That there are federal guidelines about sound walls. Is that related solely to is that related to construction, or is that related solely to federal funding elements? Meaning, could a sound wall with this design, if funded by solely county resources, be proposed and done? Help me understand the degree to which the tent of federal guidelines covers.
Commissioner Marshall, through the chair. I don't know if I can answer that right now. I mean, I maybe I've blocked out those hearings, but I just don't have I don't remember. I can't answer it. I think we were just prepared to talk about this one project. Yeah.
And I think Mr. Pettit is about to politely remind me that this is out of scope to this topic. So I would go on to the next question that I think is in scope to this project, though I'm going to ask the question in the negative. There has been reference made to the length or the linear width relative to the road of this sound wall versus the North Jameson sound walls. That, if I'm understanding properly, part of why this is getting approved is because it's short. I'm curious as to what is the length that made this short enough, and what is the gap that would exist between multiple short walls that would allow the short walls to be approved as opposed to one long wall? So to make it relevant to this project, what was the length that was being compared on this project that deemed this short enough? If that makes sense as a question that keeps us on topic to this project.
Matt, was the length of the, go ahead.
Yep. Commissioner Miller, through the chair. So the project was analyzed for a continuous length of wall. There was no, let me see how I can frame this. Our analysis assumed that the flood wall was continuous in both directions for an indefinite amount of distance. So it did not, there was no credit given for water being diverted around the adjacent property where there is no wall. If all walls were built similar to this design, of course, site-specific constraints need to be considered.
Maybe I misunderstood earlier comments then. So, and me and misunderstanding comments is something we should all be very open to the possibility of. So, I thought that there was did I misunderstand that this is being, that it was the shortness of this wall that was part of the basis of its approval? If not, if we could unpack what was trying to be conveyed at that point.
Well, Commissioner Marshall, I do think it's a different project. I mean, I think the size and scope of a project is different, and I'm sure that comes into play. I don't know specifically if flood has specific standards related to a length of a wall. I don't know, but they were able to analyze this on a site-specific. They don't compare it to another project. They're just asked to look at this project site, this property, the length of the wall. Are they able to meet the requirements? And flood said that it did.
I guess I'm imagining, perhaps incorrectly, that somewhere there is like an algebraic equation that numbers go into and like outspits yes or no, and that it would be the same algebra equation? Am I inventing things that don't, is that not how
There's a big difference here. The biggest difference is that it's on the south side of the freeway, not the north side. So that has a completely enormous effect, because that's the problem, is the north side doesn't have no place for the water to go. Once across the freeway, it's a whole different ballgame. But anyway, without getting into too much detail, Sandy, could you have a question? We can come back.
Sure, absolutely, please come back.
My question is, if I understand what we've been looking at, it's adjacent to an existing similar wall, is that correct?
I'm sorry, Commissioner, can you repeat that?
Oh, it's my understanding that there's already a neighbor wall, that this is just adjoining. So,
That is
as
correct.
to Marshall's point, it's not just one project and length, it's actually the length of the whole completed property.
No, Commissioner, you should not take into account the existing development on the adjacent parcel, because that's not up for review or approval.
I understand, but I just want to clarify that that's my understanding of what's already in place. I mean,
Correct, there's an existing wall on the adjacent property.
and do you have any idea when that was approved?
We do not, no. What time? 2014.
So, you have more to say?
We have a meeting coming up, this is with, about a Montecito flood control project that everybody has announced. Would it make sense to separately agendize a conversation with county flood control about the results of that meeting at a future meeting here? Because it's not related to this project, but I have
Yes,
a lot of curiosity about sound walls in our community.
Well, flood control has said they will come with Public Works to speak to us whenever we want. So we can ask them if they will come back later this fall. But I don't know more than that. But I think we should try to isolate this discussion and either approve or disapprove of this project. So, more questions. Go ahead.
One question.
Yes.
I know when I visited with MBAR in October of last year, there was, I thought they required an acoustic study. That was done? And is it in our, I assume it was completed? Maybe I missed it in our packet. I assume they requested it. I assume it was provided. I just want clarity. In fact, it's a sound wall. MBAR requested acoustic studies. Thank you.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, so we're not aware of any acoustic study that was completed. Planning staff did not request or require an acoustic study. If the MBAR requested that, that's possible. We could look into that, but that's not anything that county staff requested.
So the sound wall is basically not predicated on an acoustic study. It's, right, it's just assumptive that this wooden wall would be a sound wall.
So this property is located in the coastal zone, and it's subject to Article 2 coastal zoning ordinance. And within that code, an applicant is allowed to submit for an application for a minor conditional use permit for a wall that's greater than 8 feet in height. So that is why we are here today, because they've proposed a wall that is 12 feet in height. The whole intent and purpose of the wall for sound reduction is not something that we enforce. It is the height and dimensions of the wall that is proposed.
So perhaps it's mischaracterized as a sound wall.
The applicant has included in their project description that it is a sound wall, and they are welcome to do so. Our review is based on the actual dimensions and height of the wall.
As is ours.
Right.
Okay, are we finished our discussion? Questions, and do we have, yes,
Chair, just ask for public comment, then we can
okay.
move to.
How are you? Is public comment?
No request for this item.
Thank you for correcting me again. All right, so do we have a motion in front of us yet?
I move to approve the findings of staff and approve the project.
I would second that motion.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, just for clarity's sake, the motion maker is moving the recommended actions as shown on the screen. Is that correct?
Yes.
So that particular case is the case we're dealing with here, because I didn't see a specific name for it, but we'll go along with assuming that's the right one. Okay, so
Are we having deliberations before this, or we've had a second? Is deliberations sort of in
not a
comments?
foregone, we could have deliberations. So let's start right here with deliberations.
I was wondering, I understand the motion, if there is any way to qualify the motion with sound wall keeps on coming through the project description, which the applicant can call it apparently anything they wish. But ours is very specific to the minor CUP of the 12-foot height. And I'm concerned that there will be inference that we are confirming it's a sound wall, okay? And that the applicant's understanding that will provide privacy and security, as the applicant's letter suggested, that somehow there should be a carve-out, that we are not approving this as a sound wall, okay? There was no acoustic study, nor are we sanctioning that this is a public safety
Mitigation.
Correct. So is there any way, help us, Secretary Wilson, to frame that, and part of the approval of the project, however, anyway.
I can help you with that. I think without having an official sound wall study, we can't approve this as a sound wall, but we can approve it as it's put forth And considering the name is only a name and not a predicate for sound distortion or whatever, mitigation. How's that sound? Or do you need that? Or do you want that?
So, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I do have a recommendation. The recommendation is to move the project forward as the motion, and the second is you're approving a wall. How it's characterized is, I think, what's up for discussion right now. Sound wall, security wall. For all intents and purposes, it's a wall that meets flood controls requirements to be there. My recommendation is you move forward with the action, and then you could make a comment that we can put in the action letter saying the commission's discussion was that this is a wall and it isn't being characterized as a sound wall or security wall. It's just a wall, and we can make that as part of the action letter.
Could the applicant revise the description as, could the applicant offer a project description revision, taking away, removing sound and just say wall?
I think we're overly
Can I
complicated.
interject for just a second? I've been living with acousticians for the last 2 years on a number of projects. Any hard surface wall, that is not transparent in any way, is a sound wall. This is a sound wall. It will reflect sound. That's what makes it work. It could be concrete, it could be wood. I mean, a fence with hedging is not a sound wall. That does nothing in terms of the permeation of sound. This is actually a sound wall. So it is not a security wall, as we have commented.
Don, does that satisfy your?
Yeah, if we could comment on the security part, I will entertain Commissioner Kupiak's great history with acoustics, even though there is not acoustic findings on this one. Thank you.
Okay, Jeff.
Yeah, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, my recommendation remains consistent that we take action on the project, and if the commission wants to do like a straw vote or get consensus that we can capture in the minutes and in the action letter that we're approving a wall, it may have some benefit towards sound, but we're not approving a security wall. So if that's what the commission wants, we can add that to the minutes, put it in
Okay.
the action letter. Then that
All right.
captures the intent of what the commission's action is today.
I think we can go along with that. And so let's proceed with the vote along with the stipulation. There's a footnote of some kind or a minutes to reflect it. Okay. All right, David, you want to start again?
Commissioner Kupiak. Commissioner Senauer.
Aye.
Commissioner Stahl. And Chair Police.
Aye. And
Commissioner Miller, the commission's acting on the motion and the second with the.
Aye.
Okay, great. Motion passes 5-0.
okay, any final comments, Mr. Wilson? No. Okay.
Just to thank staff and the applicant.
Yes.
As always.
Yes.
Appreciate it. Thank
And-
you for enduring.
And flood control for hanging in there too. All right, thank you all for coming, and we will move now to our illustrious attorney. Comments on?
Mr. Chair.
No, we're not skipping that.
Can we just take a
5-minute break?
a short break?
10-minute break?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, when we get back from the break, it's going to be the long-range planning division's
Oh, that's right.
wildfire updates.
Sorry. So Brian, you got to stay longer.
Our illustrious council will come back after that.
Okay, so back from our break, we're going to proceed with what was number 3 is now number 2, the safety element update from wildlife policies. And we have illustrious staff here in front of us, and you may proceed.
Okay, great. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members
Hold
of
it.
the.
Is there a problem?
So just before Mr. Wacky starts, I just want to read the item into the record.
Oh, jeez, that's always something. Okay. Those
We could
elementary-
go over public comment now. Okay.
We have a, yes, that's right. Before you get started, there's a couple of things. Sorry to be so rushed here.
So the following is a hearing on the request of the County of Santa Barbara Planning and Development Department that the Montecito Planning Commission consider recommending that the County Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors adopt a comprehensive plan amendment case number 22, GPA 5.
Mr. Chair and
Yes.
Commissioners, just for clarity's sake, this is a legislative item, so ex parte is not required for a legislative item. If Commissioner Stahl wants to report on conversations, she can, but it's not required on this item because it's a legislative item.
Okay. You sure you don't want to say something anyway? Okay. All right. Is there any other interruptions before we get started? All right, moving forward. Staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Good morning. We're pleased to be here to present to you our seismic safety and safety element update, and I'd like to turn the presentation over to our project manager, Whitney Wilkinson.
Thanks, David. Good morning, Chair Police and member commissioners. Again, my name for the record is Whitney Wilkinson. I'm a planner in the Long Range Planning Division and project manager for the safety element update. I'm here today, again, to present the amendments to the safety element that consist of wildfire information and policies. Also here with me today, in case there are in-depth questions on fire practices and regulations, is Rob Hazard, our county fire marshal, directly to my right, and also Aaron Briner from Montecito Fire. The purpose of this update to the safety element is to meet some of the legislative requirements pertaining to the safety element, incorporate the 2022 multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan into the safety element, and to meet the recommendations found in CAL FIRE's safety element assessment, which covers some legislative requirements. The legislative updates we are specifically addressing include SB 1241. The last update to the safety element in 2015 aimed to address this legislation. However, the Board of Supervisors elected to leave some requirements for a future update and are now addressed in this update. This legislation requires addressing fire risks in the state responsibility areas and in the very high fire hazard severity zones. It also required the county to make certain findings when approving subdivision maps, and these were addressed through previous amendments to Chapter 21 of the County Code back in 2015. SB 1035 requires the county to review and update the safety element as necessary at least every 8 years with any new information relating to fire hazards, climate adaptation, and resilience strategies. Our team is currently working on phase 3 of our safety element update project that will incorporate our work on both the climate change vulnerability assessment completed in 2021 and the climate adaptation plan, which is currently in development. SB 99 is our third update, which will address the requirement that the safety element identify residential developments with only one emergency evacuation route. On April 4th of this year, the Board of Supervisors adopted the 2022 Multi-Jurisdictional Hazard Mitigation Plan. As part of their findings, the board directed staff to incorporate the updated HMP into the safety element. Doing so allows the county to be eligible for a greater portion of state disaster relief funding. It's also notable that the previous versions of the HMP were also incorporated into the safety element. Our third driver behind the update that I mentioned is a tool that was used to guide the amendment process, the safety element assessment. This is CAL FIRE's tool to help them determine if our safety element is meeting various requirements and how they offer recommendations to add information or strengthen policies that mitigate or reduce fire risk in our safety element. This slide is a high-level look at the safety element's table of contents and is highlighting where in the safety element you can find our proposed amendments. There are numerous updates to the fire hazard and fire services section, along with a few minor updates to the abstract and citations related to wildfire. We also updated the language and hyperlink in section 8 where the HMP is discussed. And finally, we wanted to add some minor additions to each hazard section where evacuation is discussed. These changes reflect the evacuation planning work required of the county in the second phase of our safety element update project. These updates involve mapping and evaluating evacuation routes, and this work is currently underway. You can also find a track change amendments to the safety element text in Attachment C, Exhibit 1 of your staff report. Specific safety element updates include updates to maps and a new online interactive safety element map, data analysis on ignition sources, causes, major wildfires, and hazard reduction measures, wildfire plans and services, public outreach programs, risk reduction measures, tools, and programs, evacuation information, single egress neighborhoods pursuant to SB 99, local, state, and federal codes and regulations, our policies and actions and citations. Single egress neighborhoods is the name we assign to the areas we mapped to comply with SB 99. SB 99, again, requires the county to identify residential developments in hazard areas that have only one emergency evacuation route. The state will eventually provide guidance on what qualifies as a residential development, but their unofficial guidance to us was to leave it up to each jurisdiction to determine how they want to define these areas. And for instance, we defined a neighborhood as containing at least 30 lots for this exercise. So our team worked with P&D GIS and a team of representatives from the fire districts, the Office of Emergency Management, and Public Works to develop mapping criteria and then to vet the mapping once it was completed. These requirements are not specific to wildfire, so we map these neighborhoods in various hazard zones, including tsunami and dam inundation zones, FEMA flood hazard zones, as well as fire hazard severity zones. This work dovetails and supports our current work I mentioned before in phase 2 of our project, developing an evacuation route plan to comply with legislative requirements to map and evaluate evacuation routes. The wildfire policies and actions in the safety element underwent a comprehensive update, by which I mean policies were renumbered and given titles. Some policies were carried forward from the 2015 version, sometimes with minor changes. The 2015 version contains implementation measures, which we've renamed to actions. These actions now more directly tie to certain policies. And many of the new policies and actions largely reflect standards and regulations with which the county already chooses to or must comply, including the state and county building code, the state and county fire code, and the state fire safe regulations. Attachment D of your staff report provides a table with each policy and action and describes whether it is a new or ongoing practice for the county. This slide gives you an idea of the project and review timeline. We began our initial safety element assessment review in May of 2022. Staff worked on drafting amendments from June through January, and I'll get into more detail on that in a second. In February of this year, we submitted our safety element to the State Board of Forestry when our safety element assessment was complete. March 7th was our hearing at the Board of Forestry's Resource Protection Committee, where CAL FIRE presented our safety element to the Board of Forestry for final review. At the conclusion of CAL FIRE's presentation at this hearing, the Board of Forestry had no further official comments or recommendations on changing our safety element. After today's hearing, you'll note the rest of our hearing schedule includes the County Planning Commission on May 31st and the Board of Supervisors on July 11th. To expand a bit more on the work effort mentioned from June until January, long-range planning staff reviewed OPR's fire hazard planning document, part of its general plan technical advice series, and some of our amended policies are from this document, as you will see in attachment D of the staff report. Long-range planning staff also met with county fire staff to understand existing county regulations and policies, present research and policy examples, and seek recommended language on fulfilling recommendations. We also corresponded with staff from Montecito Fire and Carpinteria-Summerlin Fire to solicit any comments or feedback. We also asked for comments on proposed amendments from the Development Review Division, County Office of Emergency Management, and County Parks to make sure that they were okay with policy language changes that might affect them. The proposed safety element amendments are exempt from CEQA under CEQA Guidelines Section 15061B3, since the proposed amendments have no possibility of significant effect on the environment. We prepared a notice of exemption, which is included as attachment B to the staff report. Staff's recommendation today is to approve the recommended actions listed on page 1 of the staff report. It should be dated May 9th, 2023, not May 17th. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have. Thank you.
Just one at a time here. Let's go with Donna first and then. Sandy.
Just clarification, Secretary Wilson, we are a recommendation body only, correct? We are in the, it didn't indicate that we are recommending to PC. So we, right, we are not the authority on this. We are, our recommendations are forwarded to the PC, correct?
Like the
Okay.
freeway.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Cinar, that's correct. As outlined in the staff report,
Right,
the Montecito Planning Commission will be providing a recommendation to the County Planning Commission.
great. Thank you.
Yes, Sandy.
In researching this, I'm curious why the county, the staff planners did not include Montecito Fire Department or Summerlin Fire Department in the entire process, that it all went through the county fire marshal, rather than, I think what all of them would have preferred would have been to have them included in the drafting as well as just feedback.
Go ahead.
Commissioner Stahl, through the chair. We coordinated directly with County Fire, who advised us on necessary updates to the policies and regulations. And my understanding, and Rob Hazard can kind of make sure I'm in line on this, but my understanding is that County Fire and the other two fire districts, Montecito and Summerlin, are kind of in lockstep and in constant conversation about regulations and making sure that they're all kind of on the same page. And so I knew in communicating with County Fire that what we were proposing was going to be consistent with what the other fire districts
But
were
don't you
doing.
agree that, I mean, we were here representing Montecito, and it just seems like you were deferring to Rob to disseminate all of this to Montecito and Summerlin, rather than including them directly. And that process doesn't make sense to me.
Commissioner Saul, through the chair. So I'll just reiterate what Whitney said. The majority of the policy in here is derived from fire safe regulations, and fire safe regulations are directed down to the counties by the state. And typically, in most counties, that would be through CAL FIRE. CAL FIRE would be the fire authority that would work with the local planning jurisdiction to update safety element, taking input from local fire districts. I think that in the process of going through the multiple drafts of policy, I think this is just a matter of workflow and staff time of getting through the document. I can vouch that the policies in here reflect the most current fire codes and the fire safe regulations. We work together as fire districts. Previous to this, we do quite a bit of networking in developing our fire codes. And really, that's the forum for the fire agencies to make sure that we're as synchronized as possible. There's been a huge effort in the last, I would say, 5 years to ensure that our fire codes meet as much as possible, the same criteria. And the main point of that is that we want to ensure that developers and projects don't have conflicting guidance from different fire codes. So they're very similar. There are some minor nuanced differences, but in regards to wildfire policy, all 3 fire districts, our codes are meeting the same standards. And the safety element reflects those broad wildfire policies. It doesn't wade into small fire code amendments that concern things like building, sprinklering, home construction, things like that. It's directed towards broad wildfire policy, and all 3 fire districts are implementing those policies currently.
My question was more a matter of just process. That when I spoke with yourself and with Aaron, it just seemed like there was a loop that they weren't really included in Montecito and Summerlin just along the way.
I have a comment as well, or a question. Looking at your page D, 15, Action Fire 7.1.2, disaster recovery plans. Did we incorporate the disaster recovery plans that were put forth just last summer by Montecito Fire? Is that part of the overall strategy when we look at Montecito?
Chair Police, that disaster recovery plan was not incorporated as part of the safety element. That's not one of the amendments here before you.
Okay. But the wildlife policy and action crosswalk I'm looking at, is that, so this is not part of what seems like this is, but maybe, what say that again? Pardon me.
So the policy itself could be speaking generally about disaster recovery plans. It may speak to that that recovery plan, but we're not necessarily taking action on that, incorporating that recovery plan or as part of our actions today.
So, yes, you want to say something?
Mr. Chair, if it's okay with
Please.
Ms. Whitney, on this specific policy, I've been involved in the implementation of it under current regulations.
Okay.
So what it's really referring to is, let's say, for example, it's not fire, so that's probably not a good example, but the January 23 storm, we're in the process of developing a recovery plan. Similar after the Thomas fire and debris flow, the county CEO's office and the county departments involved developed a recovery plan. So what this policy is talking about is that the recovery plans will be developed after an event, and it'll define roles and responsibilities. So we're not
Okay,
we're
I'm
not
going.
creating recovery plans as part of this. So hopefully that clarifies it.
And one more thing. So as far as insurance for fire protection, does this thing have any weight as far as how that affects private insurance companies and how they evaluate neighborhoods, subdivisions, or the like?
Chair Police, there are no policies or regulations that specifically touch on wildfire insurance. I think it's our intention not to influence insurance rates and things, and really the goal of this is to comply with state requirements and regulations.
Okay. Anybody else have questions? Go ahead.
Thank you for this extensive report. Question, in the responsible agencies and hazard severity section, attachment C, exhibit 1, page 16, how would the private fire suppression services, where would they intersect with the agencies? Do you address that at all in this section, that we acknowledge there are, because more and more homeowners are going to private fire suppression companies. Is that anywhere to be considered in this? I have a shaking of the head, okay? And so not even addressed in any way, no acknowledgement that they exist. Okay, it's just at the agency level. Okay.
Yeah, from a fire agency perspective, homeowners are free to procure those services if they so desire, but they're not part of any fire service planning.
Okay, do they, this is tangential, but do they work with the official
They're supposed to
fire?
check in with the incident commander on any fire incident. Sometimes they do.
Okay, but there's no requirement that they do.
There's a requirement that they check in with the
Oh,
overhead on
okay.
fire, yeah.
Okay,
If they
so-
don't, they can be asked to leave the area.
So there is, okay, thank you.
Okay, we have 2 more commissioners with comments or questions. Go right ahead.
Could we bring up the map with the little purple boxes? Sorry.
Sure.
Yes, perfect. So when I'm looking at this map and focusing on Montecito, as is our remit, I'm surprised to see that Toro Canyon didn't make the map. And so, but it's not, that area kind of above Summerland, is that because there just aren't enough houses up there?
She's got it now. Okay.
Commissioner Miller, let me know if I'm in the right.
So a little bit, you're in the right place,
right
but kind
here.
of north,
Up here?
on the
Okay.
other side of the, like, there's this road that goes by the county park, and there's a bunch of housing, at least some housing, kind of up that road. Toro Canyon, around Toro Canyon Park, yeah.
Stables, too.
And just, if you had woke me up at midnight and said, where would be a bad place to evacuate in a fire, I would have said, over there. And I promise I'm building to a larger point here. Is the reason that it's not on the map potentially because it doesn't meet that 30 housing threshold? And in approving this, will we be limited, or would the county be limited in approving new construction going forward that would then push it into that 30 housing? Is part of approving this plan a limitation to not make more purple?
Commissioner Miller, through the chair, there are no regulatory requirements assigned to single egress neighborhoods.
Okay.
It was just, the direction from the state was to map them, identify and map them. So no.
Okay,
to answer your question.
I just, these things sometimes start as an imaging of it, and then it turns into kind of a policy and a regular, but as of yet, we're not there. My next question was about the the very red and yellow and orange map that is in the back, that I was having it has some subtle use of color that I wanted to kind of properly understand. That I was having a little bit of trouble differentiating the state very high fire hazard severity zone from the federal very high fire severity zone. Those seem to be very similar colors to me, as opposed to the local. And so
Right.
I didn't know if you could kind of give us a little guidance on this map. And my next question is, on the one hand, it seems to be showing the Montecito Fire Protection District, because the lines between that and the city of Santa Barbara seem to be done pretty strongly, in that I can't imagine that's where the severity risk ends. But then it's interesting how it kind of creeps into Summerlin, but only a little bit. And I was wondering if you could kind of walk us through how to read the jurisdictional line maps, and when color crosses the line and when it doesn't, and to what purpose, how should we understand color jumping the line?
Sure. Commissioner Miller, through the chair, I know this actually is a snippet from a much larger map, so I understand how the coloring can be a little confusing. And Rob, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the local responsibility area, the very high, is this deep red color here.
Right.
The state responsibility areas include this slightly lighter red area and these yellow and orange areas of Montecito. And then I believe the FRA, the federal responsibility area, at least on this map, is just this lighter portion, and that would be, I believe, the very high. And as to your question about the parts of Summerlin that are part of Montecito Fire District's boundary, I don't have any information on that, unless maybe Rob or Aaron do.
So, Commissioner Miller, through the chair, the history of the Fire Hazard Severity Zone mapping project is convoluted, and there was a lot of politics involved. These maps were put together by CAL FIRE in 2008 through 2011. They were approved by the state as recommendations to the local agencies. Within our county, both Montecito Fire, Summerlin Fire, and Santa Barbara County Fire, through Chapter 10 in the Building Code, adopted the local responsibility area, very high fire hazard severity zones. Montecito, the LRA portion of Montecito that you see in the dark red, many of us have looked at that over the years and wondered why that area was designated very high versus, say, Summerlin or unincorporated eastern Goleta Valley. There was probably some policies or decisions made to encourage that to be designated as a very high fire hazard severity zone. As a reminder, the designation of fire hazard severity zone is what determines or requires construction of any building to what we call 7A standard, which is high fire hazard building standards. So if you are not in a fire hazard severity zone, you don't have to build your home or business to those standards. So what you're seeing is what was mapped by the state and recommended for the local agencies to adopt. In the SRA, the state adopted it. Local jurisdictions didn't have any choice. I would also remind the commission that all of the fire hazard severity zones are currently being remapped using a much more sophisticated and accurate formula. And the state areas have been released to the public for comment. County Fire, Montecito Fire, Summerlin Fire, we've been going through those maps. They've recently extended the public comment period to make sure that they're getting feedback. The local responsibility area maps are the next phase of that project, and we anticipate sometime late this year or early next year that those maps will be released for local agencies to review and ultimately adopt. The state will not be adopting them, but they will be recommending them. They will also be, or at least the indications are, that they will be mapping not just very high fire hazard severity zone in the LRA, but also high and moderate, which will dramatically change these maps. So I would suspect all of us, I think Aaron would agree, Fire Marshal Briner, who's in the room, that the new maps will change what you see on this screen, and that there will probably be a graduation of fire hazard severity zoning across the LRA portion of Montecito, from very high fire hazard severity zone to high and then to moderate, as opposed to the dark red you see over the entire thing.
So my final question to the larger, to you all is there an implication on future planning or building decisions that are coming from our advisory approval of this, or when the county approves this? So I guess what I'm trying to say is I appreciate and want to be grateful for the process of long-term planning. But what happens is that sometimes when we approve things in long-term planning and we're not necessarily thinking of, like, what happens is 3 or 5 years from now, the rubber hits the road and we're like, oh, that's what we were saying yes to back. This is a very open-ended question, but what are the practical implications of this as approving as a long-term planning document at the individual lot level or at the near-term planning level, if that makes sense?
Commissioner Miller, through the chair, I would just remind you that a lot of the substantive policy and action updates that are in this package of amendments are really just reiterating the county's following the regulations and standards that we already must comply with from other state regulations, right? The building code, the fire code, the fire safe regulations. A lot of the policies that serve as amendments before you today are just kind of reiterating our compliance, our choice, or the fact that we have to comply with those state regulations. That's really the bulk of the changes. There's also some informational changes and updates, but I don't know if there are long-term implications to be concerned about with regard to these amendments.
To be clear, I don't want to characterize it only in the language of concern, that our community has been devastated by fire, and so there may be big changes, but that are positive and necessary changes. Some function of us as a body is the dissemination of planning level change to our community. And so if I got stopped while walking the dog and like, oh, what is the implications of this? I want to be able to say, articulate what this document is going to mean for our community going forward, even if it's a very positive and necessary thing.
Okay, so, David, I have one question for you. When he's ready. Part of our resolution here, I guess I was asking you if, I noticed that we have this resolution in front of us here. Jeff.
Oh, I was going to go by the other
Yeah,
David, but that's
but
fine.
the other David wasn't that your brother? I got that wrong. Boy, jeez.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, how can I be of assistance?
Yeah, well, I'm just looking at this resolution that's in front of us here. That's what we're here to pass on. But I noticed in here that it says that there will be hearings and otherwise general public notification. And is this process ongoing beyond us? Is there other things that are coming up that you have to go in front of in the local communities?
Chair Pulice, we're just taking it to the County Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors after this hearing today.
Okay.
So Mr. Chair, just
Please.
to be responsive, your vehicle for communicating to the County Planning Commission is this resolution, which is going to be another public hearing.
I see.
And then they'll make their recommendation to the board, which is another public hearing.
Okay.
So references to other public hearing or public engagement would be in the context of those or subsequent public hearings.
I just wonder where we flow in this whole approval process. That's what I was trying to get to. I didn't look like we had any kind of, that were complete or anywhere near it, but it sounds like we're closing in on getting the state satisfied with county, MPC, Board of Supervisors. But I was just looking at the document itself, and I misread it, I guess, just like misread the names that everyone's here.
Mr. Chair, maybe Ms. Wilkinson can help us out. I think there may be other phases to the update, and that may be what we're talking about, so.
Right, so this is just sort of phase one of our
I see.
update.
Okay.
There are two other phases I sort of briefly mentioned in my presentation that are ongoing and will
All right.
potentially come before you, I think,
So
when they're
there's-
ready.
Yeah, so there's nothing final about this, just so in case you thought there was, but there isn't. So,
And Mr. Chair, just to add one last point to that. So many of the whereases in these resolutions, they're reflective of government code requirements for any general plan amendment that you have. Provide public notice of the opportunity of the Planning Commission to hear this, and the public was invited. There's also standard notification that you've demonstrated. You've reached out to Native American Heritage Commission about general plan amendments. So that's why they're in the resolution. But you're correct. You're our first stop on this adoption
Okay.
process, and as Montecito Planning Commission, you're recommending the motions on page 1 to the County Planning Commission, and that's scheduled for May 31st.
okay, all right. So we get this thing moving. Yes, I know. He's coming next. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's a wonderful body of work for us to look at. I think what I'm really curious about is that people understand that there is a reanalysis of this giant red whale that's on the just the insurance implications to the community for what that map represents is pretty significant. So as that gets recodified, I think that, people who can't possibly get fire insurance anymore may actually be able to get fire insurance. So I think it's important to know that that piece of information is going to get folded into this document at some point.
All right, Commissioner, through the chair. Insurance companies are prohibited from using the fire hazard severity zone maps to set policy premiums and to.
From your lips to God's ears.
From the state of California, from the insurance commissioner. So whether they abide by that, they are very proprietary. They claim to have their own risk mapping algorithms, but they are prohibited by the state from using these. These are planning maps. These maps are for planning departments, fire departments, cities to plan development. Insurance premiums and policies should be based on risk mapping, which the state has yet to develop fire hazard risk maps. They've been developed for local community wildfire protection plans here locally. Your own community has developed a wildfire protection plan that has risk mapping incorporated into it. And one quick go back to the question about what are the long-term ramifications of something like this safety element. A huge benefit is that a safety element ensures that planners, when they're working with developers to put together plans, are incorporating policies that the fire departments are tasked with enforcing and implementing. And by having this safety element incorporate the latest regulations in fire code, it ensures that when fire departments see these projects, because typically we see these projects after they've gone through initial planning review. We see these projects as they come in for building permits. That's usually too late to make major substantive changes to a large community plan when they've already designed where they're going to put the infrastructure, the roads, and the layout of the community. And if you read through this, there's significant guidance in here for planners to design more fire-safe communities. And this helps to avoid what we saw in Santa Rosa from the Butte fire when we lost about 9,000 homes in Coffee Park. So the long-term benefits of this are to ensure that we have a safer community and that our county moves towards that goal of fire resilience.
Thank you. That's a great comment. Now, before Donna, I think, Sandy, do you have something you want to say?
Well, based on my conversations with Fire Marshal Hazard, I was left with I reached out because I was concerned about the insurance implications of approving this. And I was left with the impression that this would only be a positive in terms of the insurance companies, that the state was really happy with what this has, with what's been drawn up, and that as far as I was told by Brian and Rob, this was only a positive, that nobody saw any negative implications from us approving it, so.
Don, one more time.
Regarding the pending reports regarding at the state and local that you reference, it's in the works. It's, addressing recent events. Is that correct? It's a work in progress. It's not going to be incorporated here.
Commissioner Sunauer, through the chair, that's right. So because the updated maps are not yet ready, they won't be incorporated into these amendments. If those updates are available before we go to the board, we intend to include a provision that the board can direct us to update the maps after they are ready into the safety element.
Okay.
Along with their approval in July.
Okay. And that could be part of our recommendation to PC. Your descriptor there, okay?
Yeah,
Okay,
sure.
okay. Secretary Wilson, do you know what I'm wishing? That we would forward in our recommendations, just not pro forma, carte blanche, everything that's on that recommendation sheet, but we could. Would it be an action letter? Would it be a comment from MPC? How do you work something like that into, because we are recommending, okay? And we would like to recommend further this and perhaps other things to PC. What's the framework? How do you craft that?
To assist staff in facilitating this to move forward today, I don't know if I haven't heard a lot of changes being made or recommendations by the commission. My recommendation would be to move staff's recommendation on this with the resolution that's included in that. If there's other things similar to the action we took before where you would just like to have staff capture other comments by the commission, we could do that in the staff report to the planning commission or in the action letter from today, just saying here, we recommend moving this forward to the county planning commission at the resolution as drafted today. We would like to note, and then we can just capture that if there's not substantial changes you're recommending today.
My thought is it's not a change, but it's an alert that these studies will be available most likely after BOS in July, right? I mean, it's close, but these studies are of great import to consider in these amendments.
So, yeah, Chair and Commissioner Senauer, I think we could draft that and include that in the minutes and the action letter and move the action forward and just say the Montecito Planning Commission would like to make the Planning Commission aware that there's other studies pending.
And that, it's consensus here, that's just my thought that I'd like to move forward with, but.
And Mr. Chair, members of the commission, concurring with Mr. Wilson's guidance, I think in addition to taking action on the requested actions on page 1, we can include in the action letter your express interest, or at least inform the planning commission that these State fire hazard maps are in process and likely to be adopted in the near future, and that part of the Plan Commission's recommendation may be to recommend the board give direction to staff to incorporate those in the online safety element map when
Yes.
those do get adopted.
Right, because by this resolution, we are certifying all the maps and documents and all the material that are in accordance. But, like you say, if they modify and change, it should be incorporated as well. But, so anyway, it's 11:27 here. I don't know what your timing's like, Jeff, but are we prepared now to take a vote? Yeah.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, just, again, we need to ask for public comment. Yes.
Yeah, we like those public comments. Do we have any, David? David.
We do have one person that online. Ms. Byrne, did you wish to speak on this item? If so, raise your hand. I'm not seeing any hands.
Okay, all right. We do. Oh, yes. Montecito is here. Is that correct? Yes. Come on up. You got something to say? We'll love to hear it. You brought lunch, I assume?
I did.
Okay, all right.
Actually. Good afternoon. Good morning. Not afternoon yet. Good morning. My name's Aaron Browner. I'm the fire marshal for Montecito Fire Protection District. I'm not sure if this is the right venue to address this. I don't know if it's under your purview to advise staff on how to the process with which to go forward with projects such as this. But I just wanted to go on the record that I know it's been asked by Commissioner Stahl about the process of putting together this report. I'm not here to speak about content. I'm in alignment with Fire Marshal Hazard in that I mean, we're pretty much in lockstep with the vast majority across the op area between Carp Summerland, Montecito Fire, and Santa Barbara County in applying our code. But I do feel like the process was inadequate in that many of the policy recommendations, while they may be state directed, Montecito Fire specifically has our own local hazard mitigation plan annex. We have our own CWPP, we have our own fire code, our own development standards, and many of these are referenced in this report. And I just feel like it would be best moving forward, any project or I guess any project that incorporates, especially that incorporates a policy decision and a vote by this board, that we at least incorporate in discussion the two special fire districts that are incorporated into the county. And I recognize this is a safety plan element to a county-wide comprehensive plan. So, I realize we're just a very small part of that, but I feel that it would be in best interest of the two special districts to incorporate us in that conversation. And that's all.
Yes. You got a question?
This is concerning because there's a countywide planning commission, and there is a countywide, fire department, but we're a special district because Montecito's a special place, as are you, and so I'm looking for we don't govern how fires get fought and those kinds of things, but the implementation of this into fire concerns into planning is within our remit. What should we be doing better within our responsibilities here that is not in this proposal? If you could expand on that further, I'm concerned as to what I'm taking your comments seriously and am wanting to hear more.
Well, thank you for the question, and I'm not here to speak on the content, and I'm definitely not prepared to respond in detail to that question. I'm not questioning the information that's been presented to you in any way. I've not had time to review this in detail just because I wasn't involved in the process and haven't had time to look at all of these. I trust that that Whitney's discussions with Rob, as they've described, have already addressed the vast majority of these being state mandated requirements, and that we are and do have similar processes. So I don't think you should be concerned over the content that you're being presented with. I just feel that the process can be improved in future.
So there is a future, and there is more processes going along with this. And so this is the first step, and you hope there's a future? I heard that, Jeff. But anyway, you have another comment. Go
Well,
ahead.
this is why I brought that up when we started this discussion, is that they were not apprised of a lot of this or being asked to give input on it. And I would like what Donna was wanting to incorporate as a suggestion to the county planning, something that would say that they need to be addressed directly and not necessarily just through fire marshal hazard. As this moves forward, especially with the maps and everything else, that it directly affects Montecito. Just as a suggestion to
I hear
county
you.
planning.
Mr. Wilson?
So, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I appreciate Montecito's Fire Marshal coming and speaking today. I just want to be cognizant that this, not to put words in your mouth, that is not meant to derail the process today. As far as the content, there's other future phases. I think staff has heard, comment noted from both the Fire Marshal and the Commission. In future phases, we'll evaluate a process to make sure it's inclusive to the other districts. I think as it stands today, again, this is amendments to the countywide safety element that staff would be using to implement as projects come in. So the document, what was prepared, is valid and can be acted upon today. And then we can work with Montecito Fire as well as County Fire on future amendments. But I think we shouldn't be alarmed or overly alarmed on the process today. And I think we can move forward, and then we can have conversations on future actions.
Thank you, Secretary Wilson. So where is the asterisk with regard to the pending new studies and findings? I'd like that to be incorporated into versus perhaps that.
So Chair and Commissioner Sinauer, I think your comment earlier, as Mr. Lackey has indicated, we'll make those comments to the Planning Commission and to the Board of Supervisors. And then the commission could, as part of your action, say, and we would ask staff to evaluate the process and to be inclusive on future amendments to the Montecito Fire.
Could we get this put in writing? I mean, is that possible? Like you made a nice statement. I liked it. And it was pretty inclusive. So I just wondered, could this be, I mean, otherwise we're signing this thing without it. And that's, an asterisk is not a comment. We need to have this in writing, I would think.
Maybe I misheard this, but this document that we're about to approve has a 6-year lifespan without change.
The safety element, as far as this current update, prior to this was in 2015, and so it's around 6 to 8 year cycle. But the maps, the reason why we're developing this online safety element map is it's a portal for other existing adopted maps. It's not creating new maps, but it has fire history maps, fire severity map, zones on that map. As they may be amended, that'll be a portal where they get updated. The safety element will not be updating those, but it'll have it correct, right?
So, Mr. Wilson, am I correct that our role here is advisory? It's kind of a thumbs up, keep the train going. If we failed to act today, the Countywide Planning Commission would still be taking this up in July. We don't stop the train. We just kind of cheer the train along as it's going down the track. Is that an accurate metaphor?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry.
It's hard for me to keep up with the metaphors. You're excellent with the metaphors.
Maybe I should speak in more.
Short answer is yes. You are an advisory body. You're providing recommendations. to have your voice, I would strongly encourage you to make a recommendation today. Otherwise, we'll go to the planning commission and say, the Montecito Planning Commission wasn't able to make a recommendation. So if you continue this, then it's going to be mute because we're going to move forward. So I would strongly encourage you to act on it today. So we could, there's an option, take a 5-minute break, we'll work with staff, and we'll just add a recommended action number 4 to put in writing what we're talking about today. So that way you have it in writing before you. So your motion will include item number 4, which is to recommend to the Planning Commission updated maps and encourage staff to work with Montecito Fire on future amendments.
Okay.
Does that cover what we want? I guess we'll see when we write it up. But
One last thing, can Montecito Fire sit down? We made him stand there for a long time.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
I sat for a long time too, so it's okay.
All right, here we go. So may we hear is it on the
Jeff?
language, please? We need to turn the film on, or the projector light. All right, so now we have the recommendations here. Let's all read this real quietly here.
So, Mr. Chair and
Yes.
Commissioner Stahl, the state directs the process for those updates, and they provide opportunity for local public input on those. Our adoption of the safety element is just linking to that, whatever the current adopted map at the time may be.
Yes,
So
but-
we know that's in play, and so as written here, the intent was if and when later this year, the board completes the adoption of the state hazard maps, we would incorporate that as an informational map in our safety element and online map.
So, Mr. Chair and Mr. Lackey, I think the question is the last part of that motion, which is an encourage coordination. So I think Commissioner Stahl and Chair Pliche, the question is does encourage coordination with county fire districts incorporate the discussions and involvement inclusion of those fire districts on those subsequent phases that we're going to be going under? So that's the question by Commissioner Stahl and Chair Pliche is
We just want to avoid what we just went through.
that as we are moving forward with future updates that concern Montecito Fire and Carp Summerland, that encourage coordination phrase includes that they're sitting at the table.
Yeah, could we eliminate the words "and encourage" in coordination with, or in collaboration with?
Shall coordinate.
Yeah, get rid of encourage and just put shall in there. Can we do that?
We can do that. So
Okay.
that'll read now, shall coordinate with all county fire districts.
Yeah, and one word makes a big difference. I think it is. Yeah. Would you not?
Including maps.
It's part of the process, and we would go through and update any of the maps like we did this time, and so I don't think you need to call out that as a unique item. It will occur in future updates.
Well, it says in hazard severity maps.
I believe the map's included in the prior phase.
I think so. I think that's part of it. I'm satisfied with this. No, you got will coordinate. All right. Not shall, will, must. Shall sounds like a more of a legal term. Will you put shall instead of will? Okay. All right. So I'm prepared to hear, are we prepared to hear a motion here for this?
I will so move that we accept the county's recommendation to accept the report. Shall we read it?
So, Mr. Chair, just to help with the motion,
Yes.
so the motion maker would move staff's recommendations on page 1 of the staff report, which is 1 through 3, and include recommended action number 4 as shown on the screen.
That'd be good. All right, so do we have a second? There's a second from Stahl. Okay, should we take a vote? Go ahead.
Commissioner Kubiak.
Aye.
Commissioner Senauer.
Aye.
Commissioner Miller.
Nay.
Commissioner Stahl.
Aye.
Chair Palice.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1.
Thank you for your efforts. Appreciate all of you and your patience. Good work. Don't give up.
Yeah.
Stay with it.
Thank you very much.
So Chair Palice, we do have one other item on the agenda, which is a training by Councilor Pettit on Brown Act. So
Yes.
I understand there is a hard stop on one commissioner at noon. So the options are we can move forward with the training now, we can continue it, or.
I think we should continue, if that's all possible. We can, I think, does everybody agree to stay for 30 minutes?
I cannot, but
Oh,
Mr. Villalobos, could I come to your office and watch the video like I did before?
Well, I can send you the video too. Yeah.
Does that constitute me having done the training, or is it important to be in person?
jeez. Okay.
So I recommend so it's not required. There was some interest by the commissioners to have a Brown Act training to bring us up
Okay.
to speed. So if we're missing commissioners, I'd recommend we just do it all when everybody's in person. So if there's any questions, we all benefit from the questions and instruction by counselor. So
So this 30 minutes, we just have to postpone?
I would be able
Okay.
to, after the lunch break, come back, but my understanding is Commissioner Kubiak would not be able to.
Okay.
So we could take it, well, we probably should read it in the record and then ask for a motion to continue it.
Yep.
And
Sorry,
then
Brian.
that continuance would be at the next scheduled planning
Okay.
commission. We don't know when that is because we don't have,
We do. We have a June.
June, so yeah. I was already canceling June in my mind, but yes, we'll be back in June.
Okay,
So why don't I read that into the record?
please.
The Montecito Planning Commission will receive a training from County Council on Brown Act teleconferencing rules.
Okay, so do you want to ask for a continuance?
Move to continue.
Okay, so we'll postpone this presentation till the June meeting?
Certainly, Chair. If I could just make one comment
Please, go
before
right
we
ahead.
continue the item. You have the materials from the presentation. There are some new rules applicable with respect to teleconferencing. If you have any questions about those in advance of the training, don't hesitate to reach
Call
out.
you, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I feel like I'm sand in the gears here. If you all went forward with the training, would it be possible for me to schedule time with Mr. Pettit one to complete it, such that
No, we're going to postpone.
Okay.
It's all right.
So I think I have a motion. I didn't hear a second.
And I think the motion is for June, to
Yes.
continue to June.
Right. All those in favor? Aye.
Can we have a short discussion on this?
We may have a short discussion, please.
Short. I just find that it's imperative and of import that this commission, when we have meetings, are here for the complete agenda presentations. It happens to this commission more often than not that members cannot stay past a hard stop of their choosing, and we do not know that ahead of time. And I think we meet once a month, and I would just like to see if we could get all on the same page and I brought this up before, that we commit to, looking at the agenda and all, that we commit to being here for our due diligence and our responsibility to the community and the county. So I am a no vote on continuance.
Okay, that's one vote. Bob? Did you vote? Aye. Aye? Okay, so we have 3 ayes, 4 ayes? All right, I don't take exception at all. I think you have a good comment, and I think in the future, while I'm chair, I would prefer that everybody would dedicate their day a month. And if we get done early, we get done early, but give up the day if you can. It's really important we get this work done. And we have an attorney sitting all day waiting for a presentation. All right, thank you.